For me, I think the best way to find motivation to write in any perspective, not only academically, is to make sure that you always write about something that is meaningful for you. For me, a few years ago, I was invited to co-edit a book. I'm not going to tell you with whom, but it was on a topic that I didn't really find interesting. So I was a co-editor of a book, but the topic, the subject matter, the more work I did on it, the more I found it not to be interesting personally to me. Not that it wasn't important, but I just wasn't really engaged with the topic or invested in it. And it was a very difficult writing project. Now I only do projects that I find meaningful, and it makes it so much easier. Another way I motivate myself is to always try to work with others, because I draw off of the energy of co-authors and co-editors. But, you know, sometimes you really have to just like be disciplined with yourself. And you just have, sometimes I even, because now these days I'm finding myself missing deadlines now and again. So I have to almost yell at myself and scold myself to get myself to do things. So it's not easy, but being invested and liking the topic you're writing on is a big motivator, at least for me.
Thank you, Duad. That's a very interesting question, yes. So, like, Christine, shall we get back to the very first question that we started with about your start with ELT and how did you move on to becoming a trainer and a writer? Christine?
What's your question, Maha? What's your question?
Can you hear me?
Now I can, yes.
Yeah. Shall we go back to the very first question about the beginning of your journey with ELT? How did you start as a trainer, and how did you become a trainer and a writer, and later on as an editor?
Well, I think I first started out, I was a student of French and Spanish in a bachelor's degree. And I found out that I could, and I was initially training to be a French teacher, but then I found out that I could have a graduate teaching assistantship by teaching English in an intensive English program and studying my degree in French, foreign and second language education. So that's how I first started out. And I did a couple of Fulbright programs in France, where I taught English to French high school and university students. And that got me on the path to going into English language teaching and TESOL. From there, I kind of just built on what I wanted to do. I feel that plus the doctoral program I eventually went to, it was very much, being trained to be a teacher trainer, to be a researcher. It was kind of like you needed to have all the skills pretty much. So I find that my doctoral program really prepared me for all the work that at least I feel that an academic should do. And that's not only teaching, but writing, doing research, presenting, voluntary outreach, etc. So my path was gradual. And I think that the more you're able to do, the more you do, the more you can count on yourself to keep producing and to be productive and effective. So that's basically what I did. I'll try to do a little bit more each year until I'm able to engage in all the activities I think are important.
Yes, so this also, this is very, very interesting. And this stresses a very important point that we need to develop ourselves and our skills a lot professionally before we venture into the idea of becoming trainers or writers as well.
Because I personally feel before you become a trainer or before you go into management or leadership, at least from a teaching perspective, you need to first be respected as a teacher. There are a lot of people in our field who go into being like a department chair or a manager because they don't like the classroom. And I think these kinds of people never get the respect of teachers. So I think if you master one skill within the profession and then add to your repertoire by perhaps taking a leadership position or doing some research or writing an article or organizing an event. Just gradually. Again, if you jump in and try to do everything all at the same time, you're not likely to be successful. So
Yeah.
gradual.
Yes, it's gradual, and again, it's a build-up of professional development together with the experience. So it becomes a mature
Certainly,
experience that can help people to go ahead into training. Yes.
certainly, yes.
Yeah, a very nagging question that I've been keeping in mind for some time. You've been in the Middle East for so long. So, what do you think is the best way to develop literacy and application of assessment for teachers around the Middle East?
Well, again, I've dedicated, well, most of my career to helping teachers become more assessment literate. And I feel that the Middle East, we do a fairly good job of that. I think that, at least I talk from my own context, which is the Gulf. And I'm really proud of the way my own institution looks at assessment. You know, the big recommendation of us, if teachers need to learn one thing about assessment, it's the concept of multiple measures assessment. And by multiple measures assessment, I mean that there is no one single way or type of assessment that will give us all the information we need to have about the proficiency levels or ability levels of our students. So we have to engage in different types of assessment. Now, by that I mean, again, there's our tests and quizzes, our final exams, our midterm,
Yes.
our Leo's presentations. So we need to have a good mix of both types of assessment. And that's probably the most important point for teachers to understand, that we don't want to do all multiple choice quizzes. And that's the danger now in this time when we're using the computer to deliver instruction. There's the temptation to use computer programs that go along with our learning management systems that only effectively assess students with objective types of questions like MCQs, true, false, matching. Now those questions are good, but we don't want to have all of our assessment based on those objective types of questions.
Yes. Would you kindly explain to the audience why we shouldn't be doing that all the time?
Well, because we all know students we've all had a student in our classes and we know they're a good student, but then when we see their test scores, we can't believe our eyes. We think this student is really good. Why did this student not score well on our multiple choice test? Because some students do not have the ability conceptually or cognitively to do well with that type of assessment. So we need to make sure that we don't want those types of students to fall through the cracks. So that's why we want to sample widely the different types of assessment that we use. We want to cater for all different learning styles, all different cognitive levels, etc. Now, this is not to say that I'm against multiple choice testing, because multiple choice testing is a wonderful way to test, so long as it's not the only method of assessment that you're using.
Yes, and this would take us naturally to the second question that is about your book, which is a practical guide to assessing English language learners. In this book, you spoke about different assessment techniques for each of the four language skills. Would you suggest or you recommend two types of these assessments that can be used online by teachers nowadays?
Okay, well, let's start with reading. Reading is very amenable to objective types of questions. So it's very easy to do a computerized or a digital test with things like multiple choice, true, false, matching, what is the best main idea, etc., through objective types of testing. But it's also important to do things that aren't necessarily amenable to computer-based formats, like short answer questions, comprehension questions, or a new thing now is a writing on reading, where you use the reading text as a stimulus for a later writing assignment. So that's an interesting way to assess and very, very doable in online formats. But you need to also think about alternative assessments. So reading a reading portfolio, for example, would be an interesting way to put something together where students write summaries or paragraphs or answer questions about different things that they've read, and they keep a log of the different kinds of things they've read. So that's reading. Writing, again, the general way that we assess writing is we take snapshot approaches to writing, let's say at midterm and at final. And we usually ask students to produce essays of about 250 words. That's considered a good sample of writing. However, when the danger of that is that if we're always asking students to write IELTS type essays of 250 words, then students don't, like in life, when we write, we're not necessarily limited to a 250 word essay or a 50-word paragraph. So the thing to remember with the assessment of writing is to widely sample a number of different writing types and writing lengths. So this is a very important thing with writing. And writing, of course, is not very easy to do for teachers, at least, in computerized formats, although we can collect samples where the students type an essay on, let's say, Blackboard Learn or Moodle or whatever program you're using. But the technology is not there. Have come up with programs that could change the face of writing assessment in the future. I don't know if you've heard of E-Rater. That's where essays are graded based on concordances that are input into the computer, and the essay is essentially graded in a computerized way. Although that technology is not available for us at the moment. And by us, I mean classroom teachers.
Yeah, so this program is not available online for teachers, you mean?
No, well, there are probably some programs out there, but not in any kind of reliable way, not as of yet.
Yes. What about the beta, that app of the Cambridge University Press or Cambridge Assessment? Yes.
Oh, what's it called again?
The beta, BATETA, where you
again.
Yes.
I'm not really familiar with that. The one I know is Right to Improve, and that's pretty good. But
yes, this is the one.
The thing is, with the computerized assessment, in order for the marking to be reliable, you have to have thousands and thousands of essays input and run, statistical analyses on the concordances. Whereas teachers, when we give an essay, we don't give the same essay for 10 years and to have 1,000 examples of that. So that's one of the reasons that it would be hard for us to build up a bank, if you will, of the same essay. But one day, teachers can dream that one day our essays will be marked for the computer or by the computer for us.
Yes.
So that's reading, writing. Let's move on to listening. Lots of good listening. And one of the things our students like, they're pretty much addicted to Netflix, movies, series, that kind of thing. So we've got lots of scope for the assessment of listening. What we have now, though, is because of the influx of video content, we now have the dilemma. Some testers feel there is a dilemma that listening is different when we just hear the audio versus when we see the visual and hear the audio simultaneously. So the listening skill can be contaminated, if you will, with the addition of audio or visual input. So lots of different scope for listening tests. For speaking,
so you believe that we shouldn't be introducing videos to students in class? That's what you mean?
No, of course not. No, I think it's very rarely do we listen to something or someone in real life without having something. Even now, what we're doing right now, I'm basically what's called in the testing literature a talking head, where you can just see my head and and then people are looking at the slide to accompany that. So even if I were the full screen and you could see me talking, I'd still kind of be the most basic thing. But it's very rare that you'd listen to someone without actually seeing a picture of them, like on the slide or like the talking head type of thing in a Zoom. So I think it's much more authentic if there is a visual element, because it's much more like real life. But from a testing perspective, oftentimes, you know what happens when you're totally into a movie, and sometimes the action or the visual of the movie overshadows the audio, and you kind of you don't understand. That's why certain movies, when we watch them a second time, we understand more than we did the first time, because oftentimes the visual overshadows the audio. And that could happen in a listening test.
Yes. So what about the listening, especially
Speaking?
during speaking? I'm sorry. Yes.
Well, I think, I mean, we've at my institution, we've had oral exams on via, not Zoom, we use our own platform that goes along with our learning management systems. We've had oral defense, and I think they've been very, very successful. So that's just two of the things that we've used at my own institution in the last 3 months. But I've canceled, but the oral component of the IB was still held, and those were all done. 19,000 of those were all done online, basically, and they were recorded. The exam is the teacher and the student, and they're recorded on Zoom or something like that and uploaded to a site. We only see the audio when we mark it, but it worked perfectly well. And they talk basically about a picture with a caption, and we're able to download the picture and the extract of the text that they're talking about. We hear them speaking, and it was a very effective way to grade, almost 20,000 students worldwide. So speaking is very amenable to computerized formats.
Yes. So you believe that this is much better than having a kind of dialogue with the student on the spot?
Well, I think, listening to something pre-recorded is one way of doing it, but there's also other examining boards like IELTS. I'm sure everybody's familiar with IELTS. That's a typical one-on-one interview. That's another way of doing it. There are other exam boards like I think ETS is now going to an interactive format. Their speak test in the past was recorded, and students do not have an examiner with them. They talk about a variety of things, and it's recorded. I think that there's, again, multiple measures assessment. There in life, like in tests, we have more than one way we communicate, and we should make sure we sample widely from all the different ways there are to communicate. From my own perspective, I'm a university professor, so I like my students to be able to communicate in the classroom, in society, in real life, but they also have to be responsible for academic discourse and academic presentations. So we can't forget that this is also part of speaking assessment.
Yes, yes. What about, I'm sorry, what about the idea of having to imagine a dialogue with someone and write it down and maybe try to role play it? What do you think of this?
Sure, why not? Why not? Definitely. For me, I belong to an organization called Toastmasters. I don't know if you've ever heard of Toastmasters.
Yes, yes.
And one of the and I've been involved in Toastmasters since the early 2000s, and it's one of the most amazing ways to improve in public speaking. Well, over the past couple of years, I've gotten too busy, and I've not been able to go to as many meetings. But now Toastmasters has exploded in an online format. And one of the activities you do in Toastmasters through extemporaneous speaking practice is role play. And it's a fantastic way for students to engage in simulated real life conversation in context.
Yes, that's quite interesting. So you advise the teachers to try to join Toastmasters and try to use different ideas in their own classes through the meetings that they can attend?
Definitely. And if they're interested in joining Toastmasters, they can send me an email. And there's, at last count, there was over 90 Toastmaster branch chapters in Dubai alone. So they're all over the Gulf. And quite frankly, the Gulf, where our region is one of the most dynamic in the world. Just a couple of years ago, we had a Saudi as the world champion of public speaking. And then 2 years before, an Emirati woman came third. So we're really up there, and it's a very dynamic organization, and it's perfect the online transition to meetings was done as effectively as the teacher transition to online teaching. So something I'm very proud of. And now I'm back into, because I now have the time. I don't have to drive an hour to attend a meeting and then back. I can do it in the comfort of my own home.
Sure. These are some of the blessings of the lockdown, unfortunately.
Exactly. We have to look for the rainbows, don't we? And that's definitely one of them.
Yes, sure. Yeah. Although there are some advantages besides all that happened, all the disadvantages that have been going on, yet there are some blessings in, or let's say, the silver lining of the whole situation.
Exactly. Yes, that's true.
Yes.
And I think events like this, Maha, are also a silver lining. When this all happened, it was prime conference season, at least for me. In fact, when we were sent home, I had in the next 2 months, I had 7 conferences I was supposed to speak at, all canceled. And I thought, what will I do? How will I get my PD? But I'm so happy now that teachers, we always find a way. So now, like this morning, I started my morning off by doing a plenary speech at a different conference. And there were 3,600 teachers at this conference online. And now here we are in the evening, ending my day with another PD event. So it could be even better for many teachers, the PD benefits of online format. They're not ideal, of course, but neither are face-to-face. And it's a lot more opportunity for teachers who, let's say, can't afford to fly all the way to the US or the UK for a conference. So it's much more affordable and much more convenient for many, myself included.
Yes, that's great. I had a special question about this, but before I get to it, do you have a link for Toastmasters where the teachers can get on and see for themselves what's really going on, or do they have to get in through sending an email to you first?
Well, they can go to the site. It's called toastmasters.org. I haven't been on the site in a while, but if they want to find a club, it used to be at the top, you would click on find a club, and then you'd put your country and city, and you'd get a list of all the clubs that were in your area. Now the clubs don't meet face-to-face. They're online clubs. But if people would like to be a guest at a Toastmaster Club meeting, I believe the next one is not this Friday, but next Friday at 4 o'clock. They just can email me and they can come to, I just chartered a club that we just got our paperwork. We became official just a few days ago. So I'd love them to come as a guest to observe the meeting, and the meetings are held on Zoom.
So that's great. That would be great. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I wanted to get a little bit back again about this idea of testing, but since you brought up the idea of professional development, let me ask you about professional development first, and then let's get back to the idea of testing once more. Concerning, you have recently edited a book called Professionalizing Your English Language Teaching. I find this book is very, very interesting. Can you tell us about this book and what's new over there?
Well, I'm really proud of this book. And this is like, you know, I don't know what the term would be. It's like, this is like the last real book that really resonates with me. It's kind of like my magnum opus. And if I never edit another book or write another book again in my career, so long as this one comes out, I'll be happy. So
Oh,
basically, it's kind of like the culmination of my career, and it's about, the chapters are aspects that a teacher needs to think about if they want to become more effective, if they want to, you know, move along in the profession. So some of the chapters are about, the chapters I've written personally, it's 37 chapters, and the ones I've done include increasing your productivity and your efficiency as a teacher, developing a personal strategic plan, time management for teachers, how to increase your happiness quotient, self-care and well-being. What else? And there are other chapters include like how to get a conference presentation accepted, what to do, how to become a consultant, how to become a teacher trainer, research on identity, communities of practice, how to get the most out of a teaching association, so many things. What doing research and how to be more impactful with your research. Lots of really interesting topics, and I'm really proud of the fact that experts in the field accepted our invitation to write on their field of specialty. So it's I think it's a really good book. Maybe I'm a bit biased, but and I think it'll make a really big impact on teachers especially, because teachers, you know, here we are pretty late at night during our summer vacation. We're engaging in professional development and professional discourse. There's not very many professions that I know that are as dedicated to development as we are. So I think there's going to be a lot of scope for people to be able to improve themselves through this book.
yes, that's quite interesting. I have been through the book quite quickly. It's really, really interesting, and it attracts you to read more and more without stopping. So it's rather a good book, which I really recommend to teachers to try to go through. It's going to benefit them a lot, especially that you've already mentioned the number of topics that people would be thinking about, but sometimes they are not sure how to go ahead with them. And this, that I mentioned
Right.
the idea of this book because I wanted to ask your advice how to help teachers to do proper professional development during lockdown.
Well, I have to say that when this first happened, I consider myself, I'm very comfortable in a face-to-face conference and walking into a classroom. That's my domain. I've been in the classroom for almost 30 years, and I feel in control and in charge. But when we went to the shift move, or the quick move to fully online, I was a bit kind of lost. In fact, even though at my institution, we have a blended format. So we've already moved half online. But when we were all sent home, and we had a great transition into this, but it was the first time in recent years that I have felt like a rank amateur. Like, for example, you know, it would take me, I would do a 3-hour PD to learn how to do something that would fill up like a minute or two worth of class time. It was so onerous. And then I planned out my class in such a way that I had to number everything to remember the order that I wanted to, you know, share things. So I became what I feel like kind of a novice teacher. Now, okay, 3 months later, fast forward, here I am, and I feel much more comfortable. But my own PD suffered because I was invited to do lots of events when this first happened, but I was so overwhelmed with what had happened and not wanting to let my students down that I did not accept a lot of invitations. Now I've got my head above water, so I feel like I have something to share. But what I recommend teachers do is I think that we need to, because we really don't know what's going to happen in September. I personally believe we'll have a hybrid system where some of what we do will be online, but there might be, I'm hoping, some face-to-face with our students. But we won't know, and we probably won't know till way closer to the time. So I'm here in Dubai for my summer, the first time I haven't traveled. So I'm targeting getting my skills even further up to par for online teaching and even doing some hybrid training. So I'm trying to engage in PD that's relevant for me right now, kind of like just-in-time training. But there are other things. I think it's important that we don't, like lots of people, I see lots of events, the pandemic era, these kinds of things. So I think it's important that we don't just jump on a bandwagon because this is what's happening now. We need to think about what's happening now, but what could happen in the future? Like what could be the changes? So don't just drop your other PD priorities to focus on what we're doing now. Keep those in mind too. So there's lots of online options, even too many. Pick, don't do everything, pick and choose, basically. I personally, there's so many things on social media now. I personally have difficulty keeping track of what to do, of what I should be doing, basically.
Yes,
I guess that's a good problem to have, isn't it? Rather than a not so good problem.
yeah, but the idea is that teachers are already mixed up. They can find lots of interesting webinars, but nowadays, because as you said, the people started getting their heads above the water, so they started working on MOOCs as well. So they are being bombarded with lots of conferences, MOOCs, and webinars. So how do you advise them to organize their professional development? That's my question.
Well, I feel that we're all on vacation. I'm assuming people that are here are all from this area. So we need to also think that this might be, we need to recharge. So I'm not doing any MOOCs. I'm not doing anything long-term. I'm doing things where I personally feel the two things I've done so far in the last couple days have been 20 to 30 minutes in length. And I really like that length of time for a PD session, because one of the things I find is that we're doing a lot more sitting. If we were at a conference, at least we would get up and walk from room to room at a conference. But if we attend a virtual conference, it's just more sitting, basically. So I think pick and choose, don't do too much. And do shorter things, shorter, more succinct, more focused types of training. That's how I'm doing.
Yes, and I think also if the teachers would think about the idea of what do they believe themselves in need of. Sometimes some teachers believe they are in need to develop classroom management, for example, or they would like to improve about teaching reading or teaching grammar or something of the sort. So they would go through all these and find their priorities first before they just listen to things that are going on as usual. Yes. Yeah.
I think your format is also a good one. You just mentioned classroom management. I've been involved in a research project on classroom management for 1.5 years. And the results of that project are now coming in. But what I found since going online, there are different classroom management issues in an online class. So I think that would be a good topic to look more into. And it's one that has just recently emerged based on the situation that we're in. I've also been invited by a group that is out of Peru. It's a group of teachers that have semi-presentation, semi-discussion sessions online. So I personally think, here people are just listening to the two of us, but I personally think the more voices we hear from different areas, it's very helpful, because the more I talk about classroom management issues with my students in Dubai, I'm sure wherever people are that are attending this session are having the same issues. So safety in numbers, I guess, and we feel a bit better when we know that it's not just us. It's a consistent trend. So I think discussion and where we can hear other people's voices is a really good form of PD. Of course, the theory behind that is the community of practice theory.
Sure, sure. Thank you. That's a very good point. Thank you very much. And this takes us back again to the idea of communicative language testing, since we've been discussing the idea of assessment online concerning speaking, listening, and speaking. What do you think of this term of communicative language testing? Would you give us an idea about it and tell us what you think of it?
Well, the way I look at communicative language testing, if you look at communicative language teaching, it's the basic focus of that is preparing students with language abilities where they can function in authentic real life contexts, doing things that people actually do with a language. And so the focus is on authenticity. The focus is on having a reasonable facsimile of target language, and doing tasks that are real life, that one would normally do in real life. So I think communicative language testing is important, but it's not always easy to fulfill, because if you're doing a multiple choice test on computer, that's famous the world over. There's not a student in the world that hasn't life choice test. It's not an authentic function. So I think a lot of, the whole idea that we use multiple measures assessment is that when we work on projects, for example, that is a real life task, because when we go out into the workplace, we're going to often have to work with colleagues to produce something, to create a report, to create a product, etc. And that is communicative language testing, because the focus is on the authentic use of language in real life contexts,
So
using real language.
Yeah, so would you consider role play, for example, or a collaborative presentation as a kind of communicative language testing?
Of course, I think more so the collaborative presentation is more authentic. A role play can be very authentic because we would do that in real life. But yeah, I would. Again, there's different degrees of authenticity as well. And not everything has to be authentic. Sometimes we just need to have a good idea. We have to have a comprehension check of whether our students can do something or understand something, understand what we've taught. And that's okay too. Not everything has to be 100% authentic, because that's not real life either.
Yeah.
As long as some of what we do is fine with me.
Yes, so do you believe, according to what you said, so you believe that if the students, for example, do some kind of short videos using, for example, Screen-O-Matic, for example, online, and then they come and speak about the video, or they put the words that they would like to say record it with their own voices on this video, would you consider this a kind of communicative language testing?
Definitely, most definitely. In fact, one of the assessments that my students had last semester was the students did research, they created a poster, and then they added a 2-minute audio track, like a screencast basically, and that was their poster presentation. So we didn't have to even come on screen, they just submitted everything. I clicked, I heard the presentation, I saw the poster, very authentic, in my view.
Yes.
And a very good use of, there's that technology literacy that we need to also help our students get, because whether we like it or not, or whether they like it or not, I think we're going to be using more technology in education from now onwards. So they have to develop technological literacy as well, just like teachers.
Yes, this is very important. That's why teachers can consider this period of lockdown as a kind of professional development for different skills, including how to teach online or how to present online or how to use different
Exactly.
apps online. So they would be skillful enough to help their students on the long run to use these items as well.
Most definitely, yeah.
Yeah. Also, yeah, you wrote this book about task-based language teaching in foreign language contexts. It's some time back, but it's a very interesting book because it's full of ideas. What would you tell us about it after you've written this a long time back? But again, task-based language teaching has become a kind of fashion nowadays. What do you have to tell our attendees or teachers about it?
Well, I think that it's task-based teaching and learning, TBLT, is very authentic. And it is very important because I think it increases the authenticity when you're doing specific tasks that are functional. So I think TBLT is very important, and it's something, it's kind of a way of life these days. And that book, unfortunately, was the book I was talking about earlier. I don't know if you remember my topic, my topic, the area where I was invited to do a book, but I didn't really engage well with the topic very, very much. And it was not such an, in fact, I actually did 2 books on TBLT, a very interesting field of study, but not really something that resonated with me. But of course, one can't deny the importance of task-based teaching and learning and testing as well, because it is highly authentic.
Yes, I think it's more engaging for students, especially nowadays, that we are speaking about the idea of real language use. So this would help the students as well to practice the usage of the language through different tasks. And this
and the
would...
examples you've been asking me about, role play, things like that, are all fantastic examples of TBLT.
Yes, this takes us to our last question, which is, what do you think of the future of teaching and education? But before we we listen to the answer, yeah, I would like to ask our teachers, because it seems that they have a number of questions. Please, if you have any question, just put them into the chat box. And if you are on Facebook, put them into the comments and they will be passed on to us on the chat box so we can post them to Christine after we finish our discussion. Yes, Christine, would you go ahead?
Oh my gosh.
By the way, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we had Jason Anderson with us last Sunday, and he said that predicting the future is very dangerous. And Scott Thornbury last week seemed to have the same idea, more or less. What do you think?
Well, I think that if I knew the future, we'd all be rich if we could predict the future. But I can't, who would have thought we'd be in the position we're in now? Nobody would have. I mean, I could never have guessed it. But I think that whatever the future of language teaching is, and education in general, teachers, we're an amazing lot. We're very resilient. Whatever it is, it will always be needed. I'm for sure of that. We can do only so much online, and online instruction is only as good as the teacher who's delivering it. So I think that technology will have a further role to play, and we'll be probably going into more hybrid forms of instruction in the future. And I think that teachers will play an amazing role in this, I'm hoping at least. So, and again, I think I will agree with Jason that that's probably a dangerous question to get into. So I would say, let's come back in 6 months' time, Maha, and let's talk about that question. And let's see where we are.
So let's not think of what's really going to happen on the ground, because recently, the last 2 weeks, many people have said that a number of big corporations have been looking into the idea of working online and preparing special kinds of projects, big projects that would be rather international, that would include lots of maybe platforms, maybe schools for teachers to use online. The business sites started coming in. So we wonder what's really going to happen. That's why I'm so curious to know what you think about this idea of the future of teaching and learning.
For me, I've always been a planner. In fact, I like to have my vacations planned 6 to 8 months in advance. Now that's changed. I don't really look past next week or the week after. So basically I think, okay, what will next week bring? So I think for me, that's forever changed me. The whole idea that, 1 minute everything is fine. The next minute, we don't know what's going to happen in 24 hours. So but I look forward to all the development that teachers will, and I really am happy because, I looked to my retirement and I thought, okay, maybe, in a few years when I retire, I'll do some online teaching without having any skills. But now I look at the advantage of all this is that we're all developing a new skill set, and that's to be online teachers, which I think is a great thing.
Yes. Sure. At least we are going to be, let's say, we are going to be rescued, but with some kind of skills that we have already developed. Maybe we are going to use them much better in the future.
Yes, I hope so.
Yeah. Here we have a question from Muhammad Gamal. He's saying, how can an IB teacher manage as homeroom teacher? Isn't it challenging?
Let me see. How can an IB teacher manage as a homeroom teacher?
Yes, that's what he asked. Muhammad, would you like to open your question and speak to Christine to clarify your question or elaborate your question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Muhammad.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello, Christine. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. This is Mohammed, by the way, the one who was live with Christine Canning last week.
Okay. Good to know.
How was life? Good.
Good.
Okay. The idea is that I'm teaching at, a very good school, but I got a job opportunity at an IB school as a homeroom teacher. And I did the IB in Dubai, by the way, by Ta'aleem. But the issue is that I'm just afraid because I've never been a homeroom teacher before. So it might be challenging for me to go for math or science. I don't have much experience teaching the subject. That's why I wanted to ask your opinion.
Well, I work with the high school program, higher level. Okay.
PYP.
HL and SL. Yes. And I
MYP,
think what
sorry.
you're referring to are the younger kids, which I don't have a lot of information on. For me, a homeroom teacher in the American system is where the students come to your class before the other classes start, and you're kind of responsible for that group throughout the year, but only in an administrative way. But I think what you're referring to in terms of homeroom teaching is where you'll see a group of students, younger students, and then one period you'll teach math, another period you'll teach science, etc.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
well, I wish I had the answer to that question, but I don't have any experience with younger teaching, including with the IB. Although from everything I've heard, I have the highest regard for the IB program, and I only wish that it had been around when I was in high school, because when I see the levels of maturity that the graduates of an IB program have, I am so impressed. So I can only, say that probably the MYP is just as impressive as the high school program, which is the one I'm familiar with, I'm afraid.
That's fine. Thank you. Can I just go for the MYP, and I without getting the certificate of teaching the MYP, though I get the PYB before, so could it work?
I think so, yeah. And you know, you get with the IB, you get a lot of good training in the program. You know, they put
Yeah,
on a
yeah.
lot of, and they put on a lot of conferences too that are only for IB people, IB teachers. So great
Hmm.
training opportunities.
Yes, that's right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Mohammed, if you, since you are mentioning this idea of the homeroom teachers, with the IB, you are usually given a number of objectives that you are supposed to achieve by the end of the term or the period
Mhm.
that you are going to work with the teachers. So again, it's the same idea with the homeroom teacher, but it's different because you are going to teach more than one subject. So when you have to put to have clear objectives for every subject, and then you are going to plan your lessons according to these objectives. So that's the
Yeah,
similarity between the IB and this idea of working as a homeroom teacher.
Mhm.
that's right. But the issue is that because I'm stable now and I'm working at a highly reputable school, so I'm afraid of change. And on the other hand, I'm also afraid to go to something that might be risky because I don't know if I'm going to be talented at teaching something I've never taught before, like math and science. Or
So if you can do some kind of training for it before you go ahead, this would help you to be more sure of what you are doing. So it's going to be much more helpful for you before you venture into something that you're not sure of.
inshallah,
And
inshallah.
especially at a time like this, making a big change like that is even more stressful because of the stress that we're all under with the current
Yeah,
situation.
yeah, that's
So
right. That's right.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Any
Thank you very much.
questions? Any other questions? Yes, in here we have another question
Yeah.
from Ayal Shafi. She's saying, speaking of self-care and well-being, how would you motivate yourself as a teacher and as a human being in a time of crisis, especially that you need to keep the spirits high and motivate your students to work and cope with the transition, and at the same time maintain their proficiency level, bearing in mind the underprivileged students who may not have all the technological facilities other students have?
Well, from the perspective of motivation, I'm really a student of personal and professional strategic planning. So I truly believe that I'm okay. Even though I'm alone, I don't have any family with me. I feel that I'm okay in this situation because I'm so goal oriented. I've already been goal oriented. So all I do in a time like this, I look to my goals, I set new ones, and my goals, my strategic plan keeps me motivated. And because I don't just have professional goals on my strategic plan, I have personal goals like reading books, watching movies, watching series. I have fun goals as well. So that has helped me maintain motivation. And what I've done for my students is even here in a highly technological environment like Dubai, we've got lots of students who are now at home with several children in the house, all using the Wi-Fi, all using, you know, the computers, etc. So one thing that I changed in my practice is that I say, in order to be there for my students now and get them through this time of crisis, I'm going to start communicating with them the way they want to communicate. For me, I'm old school, so email is my main way of communicating. But when you look at students, that's not necessarily their main way. They want to text you and WhatsApp you and use social media and things like that. So I've been trying my best to keep up with my social media, with voice notes, with this, that, and the other. And it's been a challenge, but I'm trying to cater to the way my students want to communicate with me. And I'm also answering messages at times that I wouldn't normally answer messages, like later at night, because I realized that because of course we had Ramadan during this time, that oftentimes they're working later on into the night and early into the morning. So that's the one thing I've done, I've changed in myself in order to help them through. And, you know, we have a great IT system. So we have our whole IT department. Whenever the students have a problem, we connect them up with one of our IT technicians in a Zoom chat room, and they've worked wonders helping the students cope with, you know, installing the right software, maneuvering through the different programs, etc. So I like to think that our students, and I know now, at the beginning, everything was, the students were very panicked, but now they're used to, you know, taking the online exams and doing the sign in and the check in. Everything is a little bit better. And I hope it'll even get even better next semester if we continue to do an online thing. But I say find your motivation. And for me, personal and professional strategic planning is one way to do that. And I'd be happy, Maha, to come back and talk about personal and professional strategic planning if that was an interest with your audience.
Yes, sure, sure. That's very important, and it's rather critical to hear about it nowadays, because I believe one of the, again, the silver linings of this idea of lockdown is that we started thinking about what should we do, how should we develop ourselves. We didn't have time before, but now we have to sit and think or reflect at least. So this would be great. Yes, that would be great if you you are more than welcome to do that. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Another question from Mohammed Lahif from Morocco. Why are some teachers reluctant to engage in professional development? And how can we make them aware of professional development in career paths, in their career paths?
Well, unfortunately, and this is something I learned with my work with TESOL International Association. As president, we had a very interesting training, CEO, Chief Elected Officer training. Only about 10% of the population of a profession actually joins the professional association of that profession. And this was shocking for me because, of course, I've belonged to my professional association, and all of my good friends and colleagues also do, because, you know, you surround yourself with your own tribe, basically. But it's perfectly normal that, and a professional association is the association that directs professional learning within a profession. So it's perfectly normal that a lot of teachers don't join a professional association or don't feel the need to engage in professional development. I used to think it was crazy, because why wouldn't you want to develop? And a lot of teachers do develop. If they have to learn something to do their job, they have no problem with that. But a lot of teachers are also happy where they're at, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I've learned to not judge over the past few years. I find it strange, as probably lots of us do, but here we are, what is it, 9 o'clock at night on our summer vacation, and we're talking about work. So we're all like-minded. We're all a tribe, if you will. But, you know, I guess you can't judge people who don't feel the need to improve or to learn anything new. For me, that's one of the reasons I got into teaching, because I like learning. And that's a common research finding. One of the most important reasons why people get into teaching is that they loved being a student.
That's very important, yes. When we learn, although we teach most of the time, and we ask our learners to learn, but we need to learn to be students as well and have this same feeling of learning as well.
Exactly.
And I believe, Muhammad, that the idea of professional development and teachers is that you need to try to make it somehow personal, to find something that they are really interested in, and try to link it to professional development. This would help them a lot to think even about the idea. If they are not aware of it, they will start thinking, why not, why not? So this is going to help a lot with convincing them of the importance of professional development. I see that Muhammad has already written a comment, but I cannot see it here on Facebook. Mohammed, would you pass it on to me, please? Yeah. Yes, Christine, would you like to comment on something?
Of course, but you have to read it to me.
Yes, I'm trying to get to it.
Mhm.
Okay. Let me try. Aya Hussein, would you please put the comment for me on the Facebook comment? Would you put it for us, please, in the chat box? Yes, Muhammad says here, why are, where's Muhammad? He just said great interview.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Would you like to comment on this point again, Christy?
What, our great interview or which point?
You are going to add something concerning this idea of having teachers aware about professional development?
Well, I think that a lot of times the same teachers who don't have an interest in lots of professional development, if you take the time to get to know them, you'll find that they have other interests that may or may not be related to teaching. Things like that. Right. So it's not that they don't like to learn, they don't feel the need to learn anything at the moment, but they're already engaged in something that resonates with them, that they're very into. So I think that's also another thing to consider.
Yes, yes. And this is exactly what I was referring to, that they try to find what's really personal for them, that can interest them in what you are saying or what you want them to do. So again, this is the most important thing. Right. You care about this idea of who they are, what do they want, what do they like, maybe this is going to get through to them. Okay. Okay, any more questions? Thank you, Christine, very much. It has been great to have you with us. And we are looking forward to your next session about strategies. That would be great on your side to do it. Thank you very much. We hope that we haven't been that too demanding in our questions.
Not at all. No, not at all. Happy to do it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having you with us, and so hope to see you so soon in the near future.
Yes, great spending the evening with everyone.
Thank you very much. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you everyone for being here with us. It was a great session about testing and assessment. I hope you liked it. And we are looking forward to our next session on next Sunday with Nelly Deutsch. She is a guru of technology and using technology in teaching, using different apps, different ideas. And she's very famous for the idea of mindfulness and its importance for teachers. So please keep in mind to register as soon as we put the link for you. And we are looking forward to seeing you again next Sunday.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maha. Thank you for your effort.
Thank you, Muhammad. It has been a pleasure having you all with us here today.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. See you soon.